So here we are at our second part of angles. There are special relationships that they have with each other. So it's important we still understand everything we did yesterday. Well, let's start with our first angle relationship. We have something called vertical angles. Vertical angles are two angles that are opposite of each other. This is when two lines intersect. If you look at our four angles over here, we have two lines intersecting at one point. Intersect means to cross. These angles are always going to be congruent. Vertical angles are always congruent. So 2 and 4, they're across from each other. 1 and 3, they're opposite each other. So what we can say is angle 1 and 3, and then angle 2 and 4 are vertical. They're the pairs. So it's important that we understand what that really means. Congruent angles have the same measure, meaning congruent angles are equal to each other. So vertical angles will have the same measure. Adjacent angles. Adjacent angles are two angles that share a common vertex and side. They are right next to each other. So if we go over here and look, here we have angle 5 and angle 6. What they have in common right here is that common vertex and side. They're sharing that side. That makes them adjacent. So angle 5 and angle 6 are adjacent. Complementary angles. So this is very important to understand. Complementary is two angles whose sum is 90. Only ever 90. Okay, but it's the sum. It's important to keep in mind that not all complementary angles are adjacent. They may or may not be next to each other. They can still add up to 90 and not touch. Supplementary angles are two angles, whose sum is 180. So if you look here, okay, same thing, may or may not, but in this example, we have a straight line. That straight line is 180. It's made up of angle 9 and angle 10. Together, they form 180. So let's look at that. We have 4 different relationships we talked about so far. So let's classify each pair of angles using all the names that apply. So if I look at number 1, I see angle 1 and 2 are sharing a side. So that means they're adjacent. How do I know if they're anything else? Do you see that little kind of square box? That means they're 90 degrees. So together, they are complementary. If I go look at number 2, all I know about this pair is that they're adjacent. They share a common side and vertex. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause and try these next 4 on your own. Okay. Angle 1 and angle 2, they are adjacent. They're sharing a common side. But if you look at what they form, when you put those two angles together, they're also supplementary. If you write in right now that angle 1 and angle 2 form a straight line on this problem, you'll get extra credit. Okay. Number 4, what relationship do they have? They're vertical. Number 5, so they're not touching, they're not vertical, but I see measurements. So if I added those two, I get 180. So they're supplementary. That goes for the same thing with 6. And here's what I want you to write. If you do this, you will get the extra credit. 23 plus 67 equals 90. Therefore, they're complementary. Okay. So this is kind of the same thing, but now they've put all these 5 angles together. So it looks a little different. So what I'm going to look at is angle 2 and angle 3. What do those two angles have in common? You're right, they have a common side. So that means they're adjacent. But look what those two angles form together. You see that little square? That means they form a right angle. Therefore, they are also complementary. Do you see that little square right there? Okay. Let's go look at number 8. Angle 3 and angle 4. Those two share a common side, so that makes them adjacent. But look what else happens. Those two angles, angle 3 and angle 4, together, they're going to form that straight line. You see how they make up that straight line? Well, a straight line is 180. That tells me that angle 3 and angle 4 are also supplementary. So what you're going to do is you're going to do these 4 on your own. And I'm going to look and check your answers. So now that we've identified this, let's go into and actually apply their meaning. So if I look at number 13, I have x and 107. Well, looking at these two angles, they're across from each other. They're opposite each other, meaning they're vertical. So vertical angles are the same. Okay? So we said vertical angles are congruent. So if one is 107, the measure of angle x is 107. And look how I wrote this now. Because we're dealing with the measure of its angle, I wrote the measure of angle x equals. I put 107 and I used the degree symbol, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go to number 14. Notice that little red kind of L shape. That means those two angles together add up to 90. So I want you to write right now, add up to 90. Okay, so those are complementary angles, meaning they're a right angle, they're complementary. So what I would have, how could I figure out what x is? Well, I would do 90 minus 71. Gives me 19. But you need to write the measure of angle x equals 19 degrees. I'm going to be looking for exactly what I have here, not to mention what I told you to write for number 14. You're going to finish 15 through 18 on your own. So this is quote unquote a word problem for this stuff. If angle G and angle H are supplementary angles, and the measure of angle H is 51, find the measure of G. Well, supplementary angles equal 180. So if I had 180 minus 51, I get 129. Therefore, the measure of angle G is 129 degrees. Pretty straightforward, right? So I want you to try 22 and 23 on your own, and we will go over them tomorrow. So you need to be sure that every problem on this page is finished. If you have any questions, you can write them on the page, but be sure to load your notes. I'm going to be looking for those extra credit things. I want you to make sure that you have everything done. And if you can tell me what we did today in your own words, you've got it down. So be sure to put, for another extra credit point, a little star on the front of your page.